Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's Russell with Ink and Paper Blog, and I am back with Bernie for our final Booker 2022 video. The winner is announced this Monday, and thank you, Bernie, for coming back for 3 videos to talk about the Booker. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Russell. Hi, everyone.
I have to say that this has been something like, this is a long list that I have been thinking about, and a short list that I was really invested in these books. So I feel like I have a lot of thoughts and passion behind my feelings. And yeah, no, I'm super excited to talk about this with you. There are 6 books on the short list. We're not going to go through all the plots. I feel like we've done that enough. But we can go ahead and just go through the books that are on the list. Do you have the books with you, Bernie?
I do.
Okay, do you want to just go down the list and tell everyone the books that we're going to be talking about today?
Sure. Okay, so I'm just going to go from the one on top is Treacle Walker by Garner, the oldest long-listed author there is, and this is a very short book as well.
He will be his 88th birthday, I believe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then we've got Claire Keegan's Small Things Like These, which is the shortest book ever to be on the list, though that's by page count, because I think if it were down to word count, this would be shorter.
I agree.
And then we got Elizabeth Strout's Oh, William, the 3rd out of now 4 in the Lucy Barton series. We've got Percival Everett's The Trees. We have Shehan Karunatilaka, The 7 Moons of Maali Almeida, which has, in my opinion, the prettiest cover. I 100%.
And the reason you're doing the short list, because I have butchered that poor man's name plenty.
I'm sure it's happening a lot. And then we have Glory by NoViolet Bulawayo, who I believe, who out of these authors is the only author to previously have been shortlisted for the prize. Elizabeth Strout has been on the long list, but never the short list.
Yeah, it's actually, so I think let's start with our opinion now that we're back to talk about the short list. Was there any book that you really thought was going to make the short list and was quite shocked that it didn't make it?
So I am currently still reading Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies. I'm only on page 50, but I will say that based on what I've read, if I had already read it before the shortlist was out, I would have been surprised that it didn't make it. I'm now surprised that it didn't make it, though based on what I know of the judges and what they were thinking about, it makes a little more sense. But that was really good, and I kind of wish it was on the short list. And then I think Trust as well was the other one that I was shocked wasn't on it, because structurally I think it's doing something very interesting.
Absolutely. I think Trust for me is probably going to be in my top 3 books that I read this year. So I was very surprised not to see it on the short list. And Maps was my dark horse. It was the book that I had the most emotional connection with. And she's a debut author, so I was quite impressed with what she does. Yeah, with form, and just she has a way of language that I thought was very sophisticated and just beautifully done. So, But we're here to talk about this short list and pick a winner. So I was walking my dogs last night thinking about it, and you can kind of break this short list into sort of 2 types of books. There are 4 books: Glory, The 7 Moons, The Trees, and Small Things Like These, that all focus on a historical event and sort of its effect on the people of the country in which the books takes place. So I very much saw like a connecting thematic element to those 4. You can almost throw Treacle Walker in there because it sort of focuses on English folklore, mythology, not so much historical event, but something really like brought into the culture. Oh, William is really sort of the dark horse there, because it's really just about relationships and friendships and that complication of what happens after divorce when you've had kids and stuff like that. But I was really interested in the fact that I could see almost in 4 of them, even maybe 5 of them, a connecting theme for the judges.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. I see that, and I'm like still thinking, trying to like reach for something in a William that could connect it that way. But it's been so long since I've read it that I really can't. But I have read since we last spoke. I read Lucy by the Sea, and that has an obvious connection because it's about the pandemic. So that would have been a nice fit for this group. But
Yeah. So you're from New York, or you live in that area. I am not. I do feel like O. Williams is a very New York story in a lot of ways. So maybe place sort of connects all of these novels as well, and sort of such a strong sense of place. I learned a ton about Sri Lanka. And even though it's sort of taken away into the satire, Zimbabwe comes very much through NoViolet's book. So I do think that the sense of place is very important in all of these novels,
mm-hmm.
and three of those places and how they kind of make people who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. The trees too. Oh, with the South.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's funny too. I use the word funny ironically here. I mean, when you're in America, we've heard of the Emmett Till murder. We've seen a lot about it. There's about to be a movie that's coming out about Emmett Till's mother, her life and all of that. But this book really even brought it even to more of a focus to me. The Trees by Percival Everett, which to me is the one where I go, oh, that's a future classic in the making. I just sort of feel that about that book. And there was a lot of power in taking that moment and transposing it and really putting this glaring lens on America now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I also think that something that's always interesting to me about the Booker Prize, because it focuses on literature from around the world, is how like different people receive all of the different books. Like, for example, it's like you said, like we know about in the US, we know about the Emmett Till murders. And these ideas aren't like necessarily new to us, but to see people like in the UK and then just around the Booker Prize and then just other people reading books like The Trees is always so fascinating. And people probably feel the same about like seeing us Americans reading Seven Moons, right? Or even Treacle Walker. Treacle Walker is like a very, very local tale. It's a very and that's something that I've learned from seeing different people in the UK talk about it. Like, for example, I made a comment in a post on Instagram about how it's very British, and somebody comment and I was like thinking about it in relation to ideas around like colonialism and post-colonialism with like Glory and Seven Moons. And they said actually it's interesting because even within like the British framework, you can have conversations around colonialism based on like the very local culture that Treacle Walker is a part of linguistically. And so that's always just so interesting to me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and this is a short list that invites a lot of conversation and thought. Each book challenges you to learn more, I think, about where it's coming from in order to really understand its overall arching message, maybe. So, I watched a couple of videos. I think I was on Twitter and people were talking about who they wanted to win. And there were a number of British men and women who were like, Alan Garner is so intrinsically part of my growing up. His books were part of childhood. So I do think he brings that weight, sort of that historical nostalgia with him, the award. So I found that very, very interesting because if you aren't there, that is probably the hardest book to break through if you are not aware.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, and it's also, one could also say the same in ways about O. William, because I feel like Treacle Walker and O. William are kind of like the two that are, or two of the three, I think, that there are people out there who are like, what's that doing on the short list? Like those are the three, I think. And while you know, people in the UK are very like feel very nostalgic for Alan Garner. Like this is how I feel about Elizabeth Strout. So like it make, you know, maybe I am completely biased by loving O. William and think, you know, being really happy that it's on the shortlist because like I love Elizabeth Strout and like I feel just very happy that she's on the list. So it's interesting how that works in different ways with these books.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the third book sort of in that list is the Claire Keegan novel, where I think people either responded to it or people felt it needed a higher page count in order to become more invested. It's sort of a very fine line. And I think for me, the problem with the Claire Keegan novel is I didn't really get it until I read the afterword. And then it put sort of things into perspective and gave me a place to go with it. But I do think that when you look at these books, language is so important. And Claire Keegan is a beautiful wordsmith. Like her painting of this town at Christmas time and the cold and the Christmas feel of it all is masterfully done. And I think that if I lived in a place where that sort of felt like home, that it would really have resonated with me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I actually, since reading that, have purchased all of her books.
Oh, good. I think she has a new book. Did you have to order them from the UK or?
Yeah, Foster is coming out in the US soon. Yeah. But I ordered the UK one.
Yeah. I'm interested. All of her books are fairly short though, correct?
Yep. Yeah, Foster is shorter than Small Things. And then the other two are story collections.
Okay. So she's almost a novellaist. Is that a word? Novella?
Yeah.
By trade, in a lot of ways, short story writer. So I'm interested. I definitely feel like her book and also Alan Garner's book made me want to invest more time in them as writers. I definitely felt intrigued. Though they weren't my favorite books on the long list, I definitely felt like, oh, thank goodness that I was introduced to them. And yeah, so I think that that's really always so exciting when you read something and you're like, oh, I want to read more. I think that's part of the Booker and what the Booker is trying to do. So
I had the same exact experience that you just described with those two authors. I felt the same way.
So when we talk about books that are Booker books, which of these shortlisted novels do you just intrinsically feel, oh, this fits into the Booker canon? I have a couple.
Yeah, I think I would say I'm no expert in like the history of the Booker Prize and the books that have won over time, but I think based on the last few years and then or since I've been following it and then earlier on from what I know of the books, I feel like there's like almost like two kinds of books that are very Booker books. There are like books like Glory and Seven Moons that I think are extremely ambitious. They're very, very ambitious. They may not be perfect, but they're ambitious. They're big. They have an impact on the reader, whether or not it's good or bad, or pleasurable or daunting. It has that kind of impact. And I feel like it speaks to the time that we live in. I feel like that's also like very important. And then there are books I think like Treacle Walker that are just like slimmer and very British for a non-British audience. Like a non-British audience would consider them very British. And I know that there are books, you know, in the history of the Booker Prize that are like that as well. Yeah, and there are probably other, you know, earlier books like O. William and Small Things like these as well. The Trees, I don't know, maybe The Trees is the least Bookerish to me, just based on everything, which makes me like, oh, maybe it'll win. But have you read The Sellout by Paul Beatty?
I have.
So I haven't read that yet, but I've seen people compare it in the way that it's like looks at Black American history and it's also satirical. And I've seen people say that because that was such a recent winner, like they might not choose The Trees, but I mean, I have no idea. That's just people's speculations. But yeah, that was a long-winded way of answering that question.
Well, I agree with everything that you said in so many ways. I always think about when they're looking at picking a winner, they look at history. They have to. And I think that there's something to be said that the Booker has an opportunity that it hasn't really taken in recent years to maybe champion literature in English outside of those countries that we think about when we think about the Booker, right? The UK, America, Canada, they have won. I think if you go back, South Africa won the last one, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But also very much in that vein, right? I'm excited for the idea, like, hey, it would be really powerful to choose a book that introduces the world to a different part of the English-speaking world that is writing great literature. And that's where I sort of agree. I think NoViolet, Bulawayo's book, and The Seven Moons, they are not perfect to me. I think they have they have some things that I think don't work 100% in there, but they do show the immense amount of talent outside of sort of the bumpers of the normal winners, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like part of me that's like, come on, let's champion something different. The Trees, I think, is a fantastic book. I hesitate to say, to me, it may be my personal winner, but I don't know that it does as much. If it wins, I don't know that it sort of sends the same message. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
The sell, and it's interesting. The Sellout and Lincoln and the Bardo, and then those were the first and only American winners so far, I think,
mm-hmm.
in my head. And they were both very different books. I mean, The Trees is satire. The Sellout is satire with a capital. So I don't know. It's a very interesting list. I'm excited to see what they do, and how they take it. So
yeah, I think I would add too, that Glory and Seven Moons, I think, are also, or not think, I know they're obviously much bigger than the other books, and so I think that lends itself to the chance of being less perfect. Like, I mean, is there really a big book that's perfect? Do you know what I mean? So like, I don't think that's necessarily like I don't know. It's not necessarily like a bad thing. I don't think like that a big book's imperfect, because most big books are imperfect. Like Ducks Newburyport was gigantic and amazing, but not perfect. Or like Milkman's not as big as those, but Milkman was amazing, but also very imperfect. But I think that what it said and what it did was just so ambitious, with so much success in its ambition, despite it not being like perfect and working for everybody. So I think that it's okay for a book to win that's not perfect.
Yeah, and I think it actually, and you sort of said it, the more pages you put, the more opportunity for it to go slightly awry, right? If you're trying against yourself, you can really keep yourself, and that's what Small Things and Treacle Walker sort of do, is they keep themselves in such a small bubble that they're so focused that there's no really opportunity to see where it could go wrong, almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a complete aside, did you hear that Cate Blanchett's working on a play version of Ducks Newburyport?
Yeah, and Chris, my husband and I already said that if it's only out in the UK, we are gonna buy tickets and go to London. I've never been, and neither has he, but I think that might be the thing that gets us there.
Oh, well, London is fantastic. You will both absolutely love it. It is a fantastic city. So I just think that you're absolutely right. And I also think that sometimes the fact that a book is imperfect leads to even more fascinating conversation and discussion and learning about yourself as a reader. I feel funny that you brought up Milkman. That book was a challenge. Like, I felt accomplished when I finished it because it was probably the densest reading experience in my life. But in a lot of ways, Glory is similar. Glory is very dense in its composition, but Glory has a sense of humor, and in a way sort of takes tragedy and sort of turns it a little bit on its head. So it's very interesting. NoViolet, Bulawayo, this is only her second book, right?
I mean, all of her books have been finalists too.
Right? I mean, it's sort of like there's going to be a time she has to win. So I don't know. It's very interesting to see how this is going to play out.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Well, but Shehan, his last book, was it long listed, but not short listed?
I don't think so.
Oh, did it? I thought it won some award. I can't remember.
I think another award. Let's see.
Oh, the Commonwealth Prize. You're right.
Yes.
That's what he won. So, but I mean, I think this is only his second book as well. So that's quite impressive.
Yeah.
So if you were a judge on this panel and you were going to say, okay, of these 6 books, these are the 3 that I think are really vying for the title, which would they be?
Oh, this is hard. 3. Oh.
As a judge, not as Bernie, who loves.
Yeah, no. Okay, so I'll tell you this. Okay, so I'm not going based on what other people say. I'm just going based on my own opinion.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, then that's easy. I would say these 3. Glory, 7 Moons, and Trees.
I agree with you on Glory and 7 Moons. I think if I were judging this award in what I know about it, my 3rd book is probably Treacle Walker. I think that if you're given the opportunity as a judge to award sort of a national treasure, he has to be in the conversation. But I do think that for me, I think that those first 2 books are just the 2 that do the most interesting stuff and make me think, okay, literature's going somewhere new and neat.
I agree with that. I think my defense of the Trees is that the Booker Prize, like the main criteria is finest fiction, and I think that the Trees is the best written book of the bunch, I think, in my opinion. So that's why I included it.
So you stole my thunder. That was going to be my next question was, if you're not a judge, you're just Bernie, which was the book that sort of resonated with you the most on this short list, or you thought was the best? And I'm assuming you're going to say The Trees.
The Trees. Yeah. With the second place of O. William, but that's a personal thing.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, Elizabeth Strout is a national treasure, but I do agree with you. I think The Trees, to me, was the most complete book. I do think that even though it was slightly longer, it didn't go any sort of astray for me at any moment. And with a mission and a purpose that it really hit home. Like, it hits a home run by the end, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also find it kind of funny that, of course, I like the Booker Prize because it takes me out of the American-centric world that we live in. Yet my 2 favorites on the short list are the 2 American authors. That's not intentional.
I loved A William by Elizabeth Strout. There's part of me that feels sad that this is the one that made the short list, because I actually think My Name is Lucy Barton, I think, is actually a stronger book. I mean, speak to the year it was on the long list. I don't know what one or whatever like that. And I will always have a place in my heart for the Olive Kitteridge novels. I think they're just perfect. You can and they are phenomenal audiobooks. So I can just listen to Olive and her people all day long. So, but yeah, I agree. I think for me, the first one is The Trees. I think I am surprised always whenever I read a Percival Everett book, one, that I haven't read more. And people don't read him more. I just am always floored by that. And I'm one of them. So it's always one of those situations where I'm like, you're part of the problem. But yeah, it's very interesting. So if you were going to pick a winner from this short list, this is the hardest question. What do you...
Sorry. No, I cut you off. Oh, sorry.
You had to pick a winner. Let's do 2 things. Let's pick the book that you think is going to win and your dark horse. Okay. So sort of go from there. So 6 books all over the world. Who do you think is going to win? How is it that we both are going to agree on this?
I know.
You know what's interesting, Bernie? This is the one you picked in our first video.
I did. I remember that. Yeah. And
before we said them all, this was your winner.
Mhm. And then Dark Horse, I think, is going to be obvious.
Yeah. I think I would like the trees to be a dark horse, but my dark horse is probably the 7 Moons of Maali Almeida. I just think these 2 books sort of have a synergy to me that if I were the judge and I just sort of feel like these would be the topics of conversation. And I mean, I do think it'd be fantastic. I can't even recall. I mean, I know Damon Galgut is from South Africa, but like, I can't remember the last like African writer to win other than, was it Ben Okori, which I can never say his name for the
Ben Okori? Yeah, I believe he's the only Black African writer to win.
Right? I think he is for the, and I believe it's called. So yeah, no. So I don't know. I'm rooting for
The Famished Road.
Oh, that's right. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. The Fisherman was another author's first book that I think was nominated.
Shortlisted, yeah, Chigozie Obioma.
Yeah, so, but yeah, no, it's a very interesting list. There's a lot to talk about. So I encourage people to take this list and turn it into a ton of book club, you know, books. Some of them are very challenging. Some of them are very eye-opening in a lot of ways. But in the end, I'm really happy that I read the whole long list.
Me too. Yeah, that I will read the whole long list since I haven't finished Maps yet. Like, I'm really enjoying it. So
100 pages to go, right? So anything else that you want to say about this list before I ask you my final bookish question?
No, I mean, I guess just to circle back to what we were talking about earlier, I think I'm not sure that if it were a different group of judges, this would have been the 6 that would have been chosen. You know, I love the long list as a whole, but I think that, and I love this short list, but I think that they were very focused on on telling a narrative with the choices that they made, and I'm not necessarily sure that I think these are the 6 objectively best, as much as objectivity isn't, you know, subjective, but yeah, like I'm reading Maps and I'm like, this is really, like, in any other year, this would have been on the short list.
Well, and I mean, having read the long list or most of the long list for the last couple of years, I feel like this was the strongest year I've read in a long time. There are often times where I'm like, okay, this book is on the long list, but I don't think it has a chance. I literally thought all, was it 13, 16? I can never remember.
13, yeah.
13 books. They all could have made the short list. Every single one for a different. So yeah, so it's very interesting. And that's, you know, book prizes depends on who's reading them and their thoughts. And it probably depends on how they feel on a certain day. So
yeah.
So cool. So both Bernie and I think Glory is going to walk away with the win. Bernie would like to see the trees win. I think I would too. I think if my heart, that's my pick to win. But don't count out 7 Moons. I think that it has a very good shot as well.
And will Treacle Walker win as kind of like a legacy prize? You know, who knows? Yeah,
that will be really interesting. So Bernie, I've been asking people who visit my channel one final question before we go. What is a book that you've read recently, not on this list, please, that has been the one where you're like, okay, I got to get this into more people's hands. I think it is brilliant.
I've been reading a lot of really good books this year. I'm gonna say a book that people have been telling me that I need to read for years, like several years, ever since I've been on Bookstagram. People have been telling me that I need to read this book, and I just read it like last week. I finished it, and it's in my top 5 books of the year so far, and it's Booker related. but it's not. It wasn't a Booker book. In the Distance by Hernan Diaz, the author of Trust. It blew me away.
Yeah.
Have you read that yet?
So I have a weird relationship within the Trust. It was a book that I got halfway through and had to stop because I had a book club book I needed to read, and I never got back to it. But I need to. He has written 2 very, very good books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great book. So, well, Bernie, I want to thank you again. 3 videos. We should try. I mean, it will depend on the booker list next year and how easy those books are for us all to get. But we should try to make this a thing where we read and talk.
Definitely.
So, but thank you for coming, and everybody, thank you for watching. I know we've talked a lot about these books, and hopefully, well, actually, we will all know a winner in the next couple of days. So that'll be very exciting. So,
awesome.
Until next time, I wish you happy reading, and bye from Bernie and I. Bye, everyone.
Bye.